We are back, and we are joined now by Jesselyn Cook, award-winning reporter, journalism lecturer, and author of her debut book, The Quiet Damage, QAnon, and the Destruction of the American Family. Jesselyn, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
I'm so glad to be here.
So, your book is like really this kind of intimate portrait of these different families affected by the QAnon conspiracy theory, and I loved how humanizing it was. Um, how did you decide to write about this topic? How did you come upon some of these families and subjects?
I've been writing on the tech beat and covering different forms of extremism for several years. And as myth and disinformation started feeling like a bigger and bigger issue and part of our political system, I was seeing a lot of really terrific reporting on the harm that it can cause to our democracy and to our public health. I just wasn't seeing much conversation about the harm it does behind closed doors and out of sight to families and believers, their loved ones. And so I started getting really curious about it after I ended up at a QAnon rally in early 2020 toward the start of the pandemic. And I wasn't expecting a ton of people to show up because QAnon at the time was still considered mostly a fringe movement confined to the entrails of the internet. But I was blown away. There were hundreds of people who were out bearing their faces, associating with these beliefs, and standing up for what they felt to be what was right. And so I spent a lot of that day talking to people about what had motivated them to come out. And I was really blown away by the diversity of people who had come out. There were people from all different walks of life. There were young, old, people of different colors, people of different political views, even when I was talking to some of these folks. And there were families and kids. And so I just wanted to understand what had brought them there. And then I wanted to continue my reporting to see how it was impacting all these different people.
You can almost see how that provides a bit of community for folks, and connection. And you speak about how this conspiracy theory was a part of people feeling lonely or anxious and not having that community potentially, but also how it connects to the pandemic. So could you kind of describe how QAnon evolved and blended into anti-vax mythology from COVID? Because it started obviously, with Pizzagate and in the 2016 run, but then it becomes this network, right, where you can feel like you're a part of something greater and you have this communal connection.
Yeah, it really is a movement. It's evolved much beyond just being a theory or belief. It as it has been kind of tacitly or openly embraced by some of our political leaders who like to wink and nod at it because much of their base may be part of the QAnon movement. It has grown, and the theories have been diluted and normalized. QAnon. These ideas used to be so absurd and people would just laugh at them. And now a lot of people, whether they recognize these ideas are rooted in QAnon or not, are starting to spout the core of these beliefs. And so not only does it appeal to people for different reasons, I think there's a misconception that only stupid or crazy people can get into this way of thinking. In many cases through my reporting, what I found was that it's people who just don't feel really fulfilled in life. Maybe they're lacking community, as you suggested, or they're lacking a sense of purpose or meaning or hope. And QAnon, in some way or another, provides that to them. And, that can be a lot more precious to people than the truth. And so it can really hold them there. But in addition to offering very real unmet needs to adherents, QAnon also became a big opportunity for grifters and bad actors who wanted to make money. And that's where you see some of this anti-vax stuff coming in too, is a lot of QAnon influencer types have recognized that they can exploit people's very real, rational fears and twist them and exaggerate them and scare them into spending their money on things they don't need, snake oil, etc. And just their attention, attention can be so easily monetized today that a lot of people have made a lot of money saying absolutely crazy things online because they know it will get clicks and they'll get a cut of that ad revenue.
Yeah, I mean, you cite the statistic in your book that up to 20% of Americans believe some version of QAnon conspiracy theories. In the first chapter, you profile someone, they all go by pseudonyms, but someone named Matt. In the book, he watched something called The Plan to Save the World, and I guess then spent half of his family's income on gold and silver coins, and then his wife was a part of a multi-level marketing scheme, which is another exploitative scam that preys on people who want community, particularly this one LuLaRoe, which is that leggings company, a multi-level marketing scheme, I believe, that there's a documentary on it. You can see how insidious that is. But like that story, the fact that both him and his wife were exploited by these scams, just of different versions, it really struck a chord with me.
That story was really heartbreaking. As Matt starts kind of going deeper into QAnon, his wife has a bit of a parallel identity crisis of her own. She's been his wife since she was quite young. She's the mother of his children. She feels like she's losing him. And MLMs being involved with LuLaRoe kind of gives her some of her agency back. It makes all these grand promises about how she can achieve financial freedom for her family and she can be a big provider. And that gives her a sense of purpose and a sense of value. Whereas at the same time, Matt is deriving that from being a digital soldier where he can show up online every day and feel like he's part of the good guys fighting the good fight. And, his way into QAnon, he wasn't always interested in this stuff from a true perspective. He, used to laugh at conspiracy theories, but after he suffered a debilitating injury that really stripped him of his purpose and left him in a chair day in and day out, he couldn't take his kids to the park anymore and he couldn't romance his wife in the ways that he used to. QAnon offered him a chance to matter again, and that was it pulled him from bed every day. And even if there was a voice in his head that knew he was being lied to, it was overpowered by this desire to feel important and to have some agency again. And so, yeah, you can really see how QAnon and conspiracy theories more broadly can be a crutch to people, similar to an MLM or other vices, drugs, gambling. And that's really the tragedy of it all. And that's kind of why fact checking is so often not effective, because this really isn't about the facts at the end of the day.
Right. It is. It's about filling a hole. And things like, there were two people as well who just suffered incredible tragedy. Emily was someone you profiled whose husband died by suicide and she had children to take care of. But was a progressive reportedly before this, and I have a family member that went from a Bernie supporter to a QAnon anti-vaxxer as well. So this is a real thing. And Doris, someone else who you profile, who was misdiagnosed with cancer, and then because of that, her skepticism about medicine turned into full-on like anti-vax beliefs, and then QAnon as well. If you don't mind, just talking about how those tragedies and traumas played into their adoption of QAnon.
I think with conspiracy theory obsession, it's in many cases less about the who than it is about the when. It's not like there's any one profile of person who can be vulnerable to this. It's more about when they intersect with these theories in their lives, then are they vulnerable? What have they been through? And, for Doris, as you said, she's this elderly woman and she's always been very sharp, very bright, but she had this very, very traumatic cancer misdiagnosis. She thought she was going to die. And that, as you said, her deep distrust of the medical system really bled into all bodies of power and kind of planted the seeds for her to make her path to QAnon. And there were a lot of opportunists along the way who exploited those fears again and who kind of validated her distrust. And she found a big community of people on Facebook who told her that the medical establishment was evil to its core and every doctor was part of this agenda to take advantage of their patients and drain them for every dollar they had. And so, Doris is not a stupid woman. She's not a bad person. Same with Emily, the other character you mentioned. There is even a former Bernie Sanders supporter, like your family member, who went from the left all the way to the far right. And for her, she just so desperately wanted a better future for her son. Bernie, she thought, was going to bring that about by taking on this profits over people governance model and kind of bringing prosperity for all. When he lost, she lost her hope. And then QAnon, in a weird way, gave it back to her. It promised her that the Great Awakening and the storm was going to sweep away all these evil elites and just bring greatness to everyone. And she so badly wanted that. She was kind of able to tune out all these inconsistencies and these failed promises from QAnon just to cling to this idea that maybe it would come true. And so again, it's just, again and again through this reporting process, it was just clear to me that IQ is really not a factor here, despite the stereotypes you see of conspiracy theorists and kind of the assumption that they're morons. That's kind of the narrative that you hear most often.
Yeah, and the Can you talk about how QAnon in particular, there's like a Russian doll effect where like when you get in, there's another rabbit hole to go down, and then another, and then another, and it provides kind of endless meaning because it's definitionally a rabbit hole in the sense that like there's no end because there's no there, but you can still, almost like a hobby or like an addiction, it's more probably akin to that, find relief in perpetually tapping into that.
It's a very participatory movement. The followers are what keeps it alive. And, instead of laying out evidence to then draw conclusions from, QAnon lays out conclusions, and its followers are tasked with going out and finding the evidence to support it. And you'll see them connecting all kinds of dots that have no business being connected and just drawing conclusions from random noise to twist reality into supporting their narrative. And it does come with this sense of accomplishment. It makes you feel like you're part of this, you're part of keeping the movement alive, you're part of this grand battle to take out the deep state. That feels good. It feels good to show up every day and feel like you're doing research or you're working towards this greater goal. It's in many ways similar to a lot of legitimate forms of activism in the ways that it makes people feel. But of course, it's so much of it is just based on delusions or distorted truth, and can cause immense harm, not only to the believers, but to the people who care about them.
You do have some hope in your book about people who have been pulled out. Can you talk about that? And just, we've had viewers write in about, say, I have a close friend who I feel like I'm losing, like they're a part of QAnon now or whatever. If you don't mind speaking about that story, because maybe some of our viewers or listeners could use the advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. There are a couple people in this book who make it out the other side and come to recognize that they had been duped. And I understand there's an impulse to try to correct falsehoods with facts. That makes sense. And so many loved ones will do that, just trying to debunk people out of their delusions and make them see reality. But once we can kind of step back and recognize that the path into QAnon type thinking is so rarely rooted in a desire to be well-informed, we can kind of shift our approach. And so my advice would be, put aside the what if belief, if you can, look past the lunacy and try to think about the why and understand, what is it about, say, QAnon that's really calling to this person? What need does it serve? Are they lacking community? Are they seeking purpose, meaning, whatever it may be? And if you can kind of identify that, which is not always easy to do, and then try to address that underlying cause, like I would say fact checking kind of is like attacking the symptom, but if you can focus on the cause, which has drawn them there in the first place, and try to foster a sense of belonging outside of QAnon, offline, get them involved in a hobby, get them involved in something that satisfies that unmet need, you're going to see more success that way, because their need for these conspiracy theories will fall away once that unmet need is addressed. And there are in the book as well some expert recommended deprogramming strategies that I have seen to be effective, the Socratic questioning method, motivational interviewing. But the big takeaway I would say is kind of getting past this need to focus on the true or the false and try to understand what's really going on a deeper level.
Jesselyn Cook, the book is called The Quiet Damage, QAnon and the Destruction of the American Family. We will put a link to your book in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.